right, RJ. I'm back in the pod and ready whenever you are. What's that? Oh, you're ready. Okay. 3, 2, what? What's that? We're on already? Oh my gosh. How's my hair look? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Gordon Wiborg Show. I'm Gordy Wiborg, and I'm excited about the opportunity that we have now to come to you via the audio-video technology of today so that I can share some things with you over a series of podcasts/webcasts that we're producing here. By we, of course, I'm talking about my crew and I. RJ Wiborg is the director of the show. I believe he's sleeping right now next to me. But he's the director, and occasionally he may well bark commands or something to me. Keiko Wiborg is my executive producer, and I believe she's taking a quick break on the couch, probably right now. So here we are at the introductory premiere, if you will, of a podcast or webcast series that I want to explain to you what we're doing and why. I'm going to have to give you a little bit about me. I will post my biographical sketch on the website and on the Facebook page for the Gordon Wiborg Show. But I want to give you a little bit of insight into who I am and what I've been doing and where I come from. Because if you understand where somebody has been and what they have done when they're presenting to you, then you can better understand what it is that he or she is saying and why their attitude and opinions have developed the way that they have. I am so thrilled to be here to offer this to you for nothing. It's free. It just takes the time that you want to or are willing to expend to watch and listen to this podcast series. Speaking of time, my podcast will go no more than 1 hour. That's the time limit that I've set on all of these podcasts. Many of them won't go even that long. They may go 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the current events that we have, the news that we may have, and my particular opinions and thoughts about something. So some of you have asked, why are you doing this? Why not just put all of the articles and your writing into Facebook or any of the other social media? What I have found is the written word is good, but it becomes better if you add audio to it, because then you can hear the inflection and the tone and better understand what it is that the speaker is saying. And then it's best if you can add video to it so that now you can see my body language, what my eyes are doing, what my head is doing, and what my impression and facial expressions are, so that you can see a little bit more and understand a lot more about the material that I'm trying to give you. So as good as it is to put articles in Facebook and the other social media And it is very good and it's very valuable. I think that layering the audio on it here is better, and layering the video on it is best. Some of you may wonder a little bit about what you're seeing here and this setup that I am in. This is what used to be called a gamer's chair or gamer's pod. Now they're calling it a capsule or a cockpit. I am sitting in this cockpit because I am disabled. I am 100% disabled by the Veterans Administration, which has been really good to me, by the way. And we'll have a podcast about that as well. We'll follow up with a little bit more of my information, but I'm sitting in this technological cockpit right now at a 0G position. So in other words, I'm basically laying down, looking up at the camera and you above me, and there are 5 24-inch displays above me that I'm able to monitor the production and my security system and everything else around here. And then I have another 4 displays. Well, actually, it's 5 displays that are below that I can see underneath the top arms here. So of all those displays, I can monitor the different systems of my home and my property and see the characteristics of all of those systems that I need to know about. And of course, here, when I'm doing the podcast like this, I'm able to produce and monitor on several different monitors that are above me. This way, I'm able to elevate my legs, which I have to for my medical conditions. We'll have a podcast later on where I'll explain that in greater detail, but I'm not going to belabor much on my medical conditions. Please understand that this is the first time that I've done a podcast series like this and presented in this manner. I've done a lot of public speaking, and I've done a lot of speaking in front of auditoriums and gyms and groups of people, up to several thousand that I have spoken in front of. So I'm pretty comfortable speaking in front of people, but this is the first time that I've got a camera in my face and lights and a microphone like this, and things are a little bit different for me. So please understand as I go through this and end up editing this program so that it's presentable to you, that's the first time I've been doing this. So cut me a little slack when it comes to the final product that you'll see and hear. My career ended in 2016 when I retired from the federal government after 43 years in government service. I was trying to make it to 45 and couldn't. I had to retire because of my medical conditions, and I could no longer do my job to the level and the standard that I wanted to. It's getting late. Through that career, I spent about 35 years as a police officer. I started out as a dog catcher in 1974, and by the time I retired, had to get off the street because of my disabilities. I was the chief of police for the last 6 years of my career. I also spent about 15 years, and there's some overlap in there, in the U.S. Army and the Department of Defense. That allowed me to gain some tremendous experience all around the world through both the military and law enforcement. For example, I spent 4 years in Germany during the Cold War in the 1980s and experienced terrorism, for example, courtesy of the Red Brigade group out of Frankfurt, and spent the 4 years on the inter-German border, or the IGB as we knew it, between West Germany and East Germany. That was known colloquially here in the States as the Wall or the Iron Curtain. I spent 4 years there with the U.S. Army and experienced cultural items and issues and military training and some real life, not so Cold War events. Those of you who were over there with me understand very well when I say that the Cold War was not always cold. There were times where there was gunfire, where we saw people shot up and killed on the border trying to escape the Warsaw Pact, East Germany. And of course, we experienced a lot of cultural phenomena which was new to us. During the 4 years that I was a resident in Germany with the U.S. Army, I lived off post on the economy. I shopped on the economy. I ate German food on the economy. I immersed myself in the culture as much as I could to learn as much and experience as much of another country as was possible. Germany was very westernized, and it was interesting because the closer you got to the border, our post in Bad Hersfeld was actually about 18 kilometers from the border. In that area, and the closer you got to the border, the more appreciative the German public was that the U.S. Army was there, because they understood at the border just what it was and why it was. We'll have a podcast about that, and I'll detail some of the incredible things that we saw, that we experienced at the border, and learned a great deal about the Warsaw Pact and NATO. Now, why does any of that matter today? And why would I bother to go over the history of something that happened 35, 40 years ago and bring that to you? Well, for example, did you know that Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has attacked Ukraine and is now the architect of the war in Europe, did you know that he was the leader of the KGB, the director of a CIA-like organization for Russia and the USSR? A lot of people don't understand the organization of what at that time was the Communist Warsaw Pact, which included at the time a number of countries which are not a part of the Russian Federation, and came together with the USSR, for those of you who may remember the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which was cored out of Moscow, Russia. Vladimir Putin led the KGB at the time that I was in Germany in the mid-1980s. And he was there when the Warsaw Pact disintegrated, the USSR broke apart, and under Gorbachev, at that time, then the president of the USSR, Russia reemerged as the Russian Federation. That's in the period 1989 to 1991. So the leader of the KGB then now is the president of Russia. So why does that matter? Because, and this is just a snippet, a taste of what we'll go over in a further podcast, Vladimir Putin, from the time that I was in Germany till now, has vowed to put the Warsaw Pact back together. He has vowed to retaliate and rehabilitate the Warsaw Pact and all of its countries, put them back together just as they were before they broke up in the late 1980s. That's important to know because that's his motivation, that's his goal through his military action now, is to put the USSR and the Warsaw Pact back together. Knowing that puts a whole new perspective on his invasion of Ukraine and the war in Ukraine. That's just one example of why I think it's important to understand something of history as it leads to whatever is happening today. You know, the events of today don't just happen. It's not like you just pick something out of the air and said, oh, let's have a war in Ukraine. Or let's have the Speaker of the House land in Taiwan and practically start World War III. None of that happens in isolation. None of that happens spontaneously. It occurs because the history of the last few years or decades or more has led us to this point. If you understand history, it's much easier to understand current events of what's happening and to appreciate what impact they have today or may have tomorrow on your life and mine. If we understand history, if we know history, then we're able to do that. If we don't, as the saying goes, those who fail to understand history will ensure that history is repeated. And it is over and over and over again for mankind because we don't understand the history and what has happened in the past well enough. We don't appreciate it. After the time I spent in Germany and some time back stateside, I spent several years in Japan on the other side of the world. Again, I there lived on post, but I socialized as much as possible off post to take in as much of the Japanese culture as I could. The Japanese language was much more difficult for me to learn than the German language had been several decades earlier. Interesting that when I landed in Japan at the Tokyo airport, I had a very strange impression and feeling there as the Japanese welcomed us with open arms. My father had been a U.S. Marine in World War II, a gunnery sergeant, NCO, non-commissioned officer, who fought the Japanese in the South Pacific. And my father had been shot and wounded in the South Pacific by the Japanese. And here I am, 40 years later, going into Japan as a part of what is essentially the occupation by the U.S. forces of Japan. That's a strange arrangement and feeling that will also take a podcast to explain and bring to you the smells, the audio, the video, some pictures of what I had seen and did while I was in Japan. That to me was an exciting time, but very different. I was a team leader in the U.S. Army Japan headquarters command center and led several exercises, and our emergency action center in several missile launches from North Korea and other events that came to us as very real and real-time events, not just history, but here it's happening right now. And I'm going to bring that to you, what I can, and all that I can, so that you understand a little bit more about North Korea, how it's being run, what they're doing there on the days that it's not on the front page of the paper. You know, many of you are still working. You're not retired, and you're probably doing 2 or 3 different things now, multitasking as you watch this. You don't have all the time in the world to go ahead and avail yourself of the different news media, the mass media, learning all of this stuff and doing all of this stuff to keep up with current events. You don't have time to do that. You have a family. You may have pets as part of that family. You have one job, maybe more. Maybe you're involved in your church or in your PTA or another group or whatever takes your time. And at the end of the day, you're tired and you don't have much time to look at the media on the internet and catch up on the current events of that day. That's what you have me for, once a week at least. And I can tell you right now, the way that things go, it's going to be hard to stay with just once a week. It's much more likely that I'll be coming to you 2 or 3 times a week. I can do that because I'm retired and I have that time. My family is my crew, helping me here with the production, and I can stay aware of what's going on in the world and putting the history together with that I'm aware of, I've been educated in personally already through my experience. I can put that together and package it into a podcast that I give to you. My focus through this will be current and international events within that geopolitical environment. So politics is a big part of it, especially as we have the midterm elections coming up in something like 96 or 97 days. And of course, this is going to be a hot election in terms of interest from people. And hopefully we'll see some record turnout from people who are voting for their favorite issues and their people that they want in office now. A lot of the interest in politics right now is kind of motivated because the liberals, the Democratic Party on the left of that continuum, have now conducted 5 separate investigations in the last 7 years of one man, not the entire Republican Party, but one man who was president and is no longer president and may run again. And of course, I'm talking about Donald J. Trump. Donald Trump was the president from 2017 to 2021, January 20th being the inauguration. For that election in 2016, the Democrats had already started to investigate him prior to that election to keep him out of office. Of course, the election surprised the left very much. If you remember the mass media on that night and what the expectations were, what they had states doing, and you could watch, especially those in NBC, MSNBC, CNN, ABC, CBS, most of your mass media, your mainstream media, or what I affectionately call the lamestream media, were all shocked, literally staring deer in the headlights, shocked, when Donald Trump was elected as President of the United States. They were ready in 2020 and made sure, and we'll explain how they made sure, that Donald Trump would not be the president now. And instead, the Democrats put forth the vice president for Barack Obama, Joe Biden, for that office. We'll spend some time talking about that. We'll have a couple of podcasts about the Barack Obama presidency and what he did to the United States during his 8 years in office, and where that brought us, and how that really ended up putting Donald Trump up in the office in 2016. We'll spend some time on that, the history of all that, why it happened, how it happened. My intent is to give you facts and my opinion. This is not a total editorial show, nor is it a total news show. This is going to be the news and then my particular perspective on that with the history that we've gone through. And we'll go through all of that in these podcasts to bring you up to speed on current national and international events. On the law enforcement side, I ended up as a chief of police. I had been a use of force trainer. I had been a taser trainer. I had trained as a firearms instructor. I had trained police officers in how to use force and what level of force to use under the law and the Constitution. Before we do that, we're going to spend a little bit of time on the Constitution of the United States and going over what's really in there that gives us certain rights and what isn't in there and doesn't give us certain rights. For example, as a police officer, I had hundreds of people who complained to me that I had not read them their Miranda rights when I put them in the back of a squad car. The same people would complain that when they came into booking, they didn't have a phone call right away. I have a right under the U.S. Constitution. I have a constitutional right to make a phone call and to have you read me my rights. Well, yes and no. We'll talk about that. We'll spend a podcast talking about the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth and Fifth Amendments in particular. We'll spend a little time on the Sixth, Seventh, and Eighth, and then we'll move on to the 14th. This is not a class. I used to teach constitutional law at the college level to police officers and attorneys. I used to teach the Fourth and Fifth Amendment mainly, primarily as our amendments that we as police officers would have to be aware of in order to serve the public, whoever that was, whether they were a complainant or a suspect or an arrestee or a convict, a convicted person of certain felonies or aggravated misdemeanors. We had to go through training to learn how to do that, and I trained it was actually at the junior and senior level of college, certain attorneys and police officers in how to conduct their business within the Constitution and what rights people actually had and didn't have. And I'll tease you a little bit with a future podcast of that to give you the answers to, do you really have a right to a telephone call? Do you really have the right to have your Miranda warning? You know, you have the right to remain silent and all of that. Once you're arrested and somebody puts handcuffs on you, we'll answer those questions in further podcasts, just as we'll answer why Vladimir Putin is so set on going into Ukraine and the other Warsaw Pact countries to bring them back into his breadbasket of the Russian Federation. Now, it's important that you understand, as we go through all of those things, who's presenting to you and what my particular characteristics are. I will post my biographical sketch on the website and the Facebook page. But on the continuum of political affiliation, where we would see a straight line, and on the left side of that line would be the radical left, going through the Liberal and Democratic Party to the middle moderate point, and then on to the right through the Republican Party to the far right, to the extreme or radical right. The far left, of course, is socialism and communism. The far right and the far left, where they meet in a sphere, is where fascism is. We have some of that in different ways in our current administration and in our current politics. We'll talk about that, but where do I sit on all of that? I consider myself to be a fiscal conservative and a social liberal. Let me take a moment to explain that to you, because a lot of people tell me, oh, you can't be a fiscal conservative and a social liberal. There's no such thing. Well, here I am. I am that beast. When it comes to budget matters, fiscal matters, national security, the military, law enforcement, the rule of law, when it comes to all of those, I'm conservative. I'm on the right side of that continuum. I don't think I'm on the far right of it, but I'm on the right side. I would consider myself a moderate to conservative. on those areas. On social areas, when it comes to those types of rights and privileges, I'm on the left. I'm much more liberal when it comes to, for example, LGBTQ plus rights and equitable rights for everybody. We'll talk about the difference between equitable and equal, because we can't have equal treatment or rights for everybody, but we can and should have equitable treatment and rights for everybody. We'll talk about that, the difference that is, and why we go to the term equitable instead of equal, and the meaning of them. So that's where I sit on my political continuum. There are times, depending on the issues, where I'll go farther right or I'll go farther left. That's because I look at the issues. I don't vote for the person as much as I do the issues that that person advocates for. Neither do I vote for a party. I'm not really a party partisan. I'm probably closer to the Republican Party than I certainly am the current Democratic Party. But I don't vote straight party. I voted in the past Democratic. I voted Republican. I think I even voted independent once or twice. I would call myself an independent, but even that's a party now and has partisans who are independent but follow a certain agenda and party. I don't do that, so I really don't want to call myself an independent. But I'm not a party partisan, either side, and I deal with the issues. And I'll explain those issues to you as we go through the current national and international events within that geopolitical environment. That is my intent on a weekly basis, at least, probably a little bit more. So don't be surprised if you see me popping up 2 or 3 times a week. I'll put all the links in Facebook and on LinkedIn and MeWe and all of the other social media that I'm privileged to be a member of, and be able to stand up and speak for the issues that I believe in. That's what this is all about, my friends. This is all about putting together my education, my training, my experiences, my personality, everything that I have been through that drives me to certain issues that I believe are the right issues for America and for most of us. I ask for your indulgence as we go through this. It is the first time I've done this using this medium. Whether you're listening to me or hopefully watching so that you can see everything that we're doing here, we'll have interviews as we go through the podcast from people who have been impacted by some of the issues that we talk about. I've already got 3 interviews in the can and working for several more as we go back to edit those and then bring them to you at the right time in these podcasts. I also ask for a few minutes of your time to go through this. Hopefully you're sitting down and watching this intently, but I understand that you're probably multitasking and doing some other things, diapering the new baby, working on the car, working on work, because many of you still do, and you're not privileged enough yet to be able to go into retirement. And we'll talk about that too. What does it take to retire? So there's going to be a sprinkling of issues as we go through here. And depending on your feedback, your interest, things that you would like to see here, then we'll put those in as well. Please feel free to leave comments on our Facebook page or the website, whether it's questions or thumbs up or thumbs down. If you like us, please like us and subscribe to the YouTube channel and let us know what you like about the podcasts and the series. If you don't like us, give us a thumbs down and put a comment in there as to why you don't like something. What is it that you don't like, and what would you like to see changed? I'll read every one of those comments. I can't promise that I'll answer all of them. When we get to the 10 or 15,000 a day, yeah, right. Hopefully I can get 3 or 4 a day, not 1,000, but just single digit, 3 or 4 comments a day per the podcast to give us more suggestions and ideas about where I'm going and where you'd like to see us go. You are the reason that I'm putting this out, not me. I'm not doing this for myself to vent anything or to gain anything from this. I don't. I'm doing this for you because I'm trying to offer you a presentation, a package, if you will, that will give you some insight into some of the political infighting, into some of your political choices for the midterm election and beyond. And I'll tell you now, and we'll go into it later, that I believe it's not only our right to be active politically and to vote, but I believe it's our obligation through the Constitution as a member of society and as a citizen of the United States. It's my job under a representative republic, which is what we have right now, to vote and to make my message heard by others. So that's my job. It's your right to vote and your obligation to express yourself and to lobby for or advocate for the representation that you want and that you don't want. And with that, then hopefully I can help you to come to a well-founded opinion. You know, you could have a talking head here all night giving you opinions. Oh, I believe in this and I don't believe in that. But if that talking head doesn't tell me why he or she believes this, what the history is behind that, and why I should care about it, unless I hear those things, the opinion just goes up into thin air. It doesn't matter to me what you like or what you don't like if you can't articulate why it is that you feel that way and how it is that you can support that. That's just me. I offer all of that to you, and from all of us here in Yuma, Arizona, on the border with Mexico, I can go out my back door and practically see the Mexican landscape. On 3 sides, I'm in a pocket in Arizona, much like I was in a pocket in Germany. And from my family to yours, I thank you and bid you be safe.